All right, you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, I'm back with another one like the other one. Not that one, but this one. So check it out, you guys. First and foremost, let me just start this out first by saying Happy New Year's to all the viewers, everybody that helped Paradigm Media News get to where we are today. I personally want to extend my appreciation to each and every one of you, even the haters. With the algorithm, any activity is good activity. So whenever there's a channel that's generating content and you got people tapping in, the algorithm says, man, whatever this guy is doing over here, whether it's bad attention, good attention, this guy is generating some kind of interest. So I appreciate you guys. Anyways, before I get into this next story right here, as you guys can see, I am wearing my Dodgers shirt. And the only reason I'm doing that is because of you youngsters that think I won't bang a Dodgers shirt. I'll wear whatever I want to wear. I'm not a fan of the Dodgers. I'm a Giants fan. But I'll wear Dodger blue. I'll wear 49er red. I'll wear whatever I want to wear because I'm grown. But on the flip side, I am wearing this shirt for the Sureño brothers in Southern California. I always wear red for the Northern brothers in Northern California. Like I said, man, I'll wear whatever I want to wear. But I noticed that recently one of the viewers chimed in and said, hey, Box, how come you don't never wear a Dodger shirt? How come you don't never wear Dodger blue? And I believe I responded in that comment. So here you go. Anyways, this next story that I'm going to get into, it took place somewhere between 2017 and 2018. For all you historical sticklers, this happened in Wasco State Prison. I want to say on B Yard. And you know, the crazy thing about this story is I obviously get a lot of stories from a lot of different sources. And it's not too often that I hear about a lot of Sureños from Bakersfield, besides Chavo and a handful of other Sureños that I've told stories about. But this incident right here, it actually involves a whole hood from Eastside Bakersfield, which kind of surprised me. But obviously, Bakersfield has always been the intersector that separates Northern California from Southern California. But anyway, this story starts out with two Sureños named Lunar and Little Man. And according to my source, who I'm now going to refer to as Muggsy, both Lunar and Little Man were from Eastside Bakersfield. So Lunar and Little Man were both kitchen workers. They both had a job working in the kitchen as lead men. And every day they had a routine, whether it was getting up early in the morning to go to that early morning shift, or they would go to that afternoon shift and work in the kitchen at night. They would get up and they go to the kitchen where they were lead men. And they worked under a free staff person that they apparently knew from the streets. When I say free staff person, I mean somebody that works in the prison that's not a CO. They're not a correctional officer. You see counselors that work there. You might have cooks that come in as free staff people. You have a lot of medical staff, obviously dental staff, dental assistants, and things like that. So there's a lot of people that work in prisons that are referred to as free staff. And apparently there was a free staff person that worked in the kitchen that both Lunar and Little Man knew from the streets. And this guy was obviously from Bakersfield. You know, I don't know the extent of their relationship, but it's pretty common if you're around the same age and you land in a prison that's close to an area where you grow up, it's common to run into individuals that you used to go to school with. It happens all the time. Sometimes you run into somebody you might even had a relationship with. There's female officers that later got into correction. Again, if they're around the same age, it's pretty common to run into somebody that you either went to school with or you just know them from growing up in that area. So I don't know if Lunar and Little Man both knew him or one was closer, but either way, they had this guy in pocket and they got him to agree to start bringing in drugs. And I've talked about this a lot before in the past, and I'll keep it short, but I'm just going to say this. If you know somebody from the streets, if you grew up with them or you went to school with them, or obviously if you were in a relationship with them, it's kind of easy to slide up under them, get them to start bringing in drugs, tobacco, alcohol, or whatever other kind of contraband that you might want them to bring in. You'll have one up if you know this individual personally. But if this is just a staff member that's working at the prison and you get a job working under this individual, or you're working in an area where you guys have a lot of contact all throughout the day, you're interacting with this individual, it's going to take some time before this individual is going to go from knowing you to bringing in drugs. You got to build that common ground. Obviously, they got to learn to trust you. They got to feel like they can invest a level of trust in you, because who's going to put their job on the line and possibly lose the benefits of their pension or their retirement because they brought some drugs in and somebody told on them. It happens all the time. There's COs that get compromised. There's free staff that get compromised all the time because it's a lucrative business. Bringing in drugs, bringing in cell phones, they can make a lot of money. And although there's a lot of money in corrections, when you can make $5, $10, $15,000 a week just bringing a package into the prison, that can be tempting, especially when you're talking about somebody that's swamped with bills, somebody that's in, some kind of financial quandary, house payments, car notes, trying to put your kids through school, groceries, bills, taxes. That money's got to come from somewhere. And just think about it. When you're a CO and you're working in a prison and, COs, they forge relationships just like anybody else. The only difference with them is they got that green jumpsuit on and they work for the state of California. That's the only difference. But they interact, they socialize, they forge relationships just like anybody else. So they come to work every day and they're around certain individuals. They can see who's got status, who's got influence, and those are the type of things that they're respected. Even a CO holds somebody in high regard that has status in prison, somebody that is in a leadership position, somebody that they know or they've seen has a lot of influence over other inmates. It's respectable. And a lot of COs, they're drawn to that. But it just takes time. It takes time. You're working with this individual and, at one point it will start with something small. You're running food back to the yard and they know what you're doing. And maybe in the beginning, they even stopped you. Hey, you can't take that back. You know the rules. But as time goes by and they get to know you, hey, go ahead, holidays are coming up, go do your thing. Then they start to get a little bit more comfortable with you. And next thing you know, you're showing them pictures of your kids or you're socializing with them. It's about forging a relationship so that you can slide up under this individual. And they might just think that, you're just trying to be social. You're just trying to show them a little bit of respect. This guy's bringing his pictures of his kids and he's showing me his personal family and shit like that. But really, this is all a form of manipulation. You're sliding up under this individual. You're slowly seducing them, whether it's male or female, not seducing them like that. For those of you that understand what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. You might be an artist and maybe you're not able to get some kind of pens, calligraphy pens or something like that. And you show them your artwork and eventually they're like, hey, can you hook me up something? And you tell them, hey, I need this kind of pen. So they bring a pen in. It starts with something like that. Maybe one time they break bread and then maybe later on down the line, they bring in some home cooked food, some tamales or something like that. And they're like, hey, check this out. Try one of these. And that's kind of how it starts. And from there, when you feel like that comfort level is right where it needs to be, that's when you spring that question. Hey, check this out, man. You want to make a little bit of extra money? Look, you can make some money. You can make a killing bringing in cell phones, or if you bring in this, you bring in that. This is how much money you can make. And then once you cross that line, maybe you've misread them. Maybe they're like, hey, nah, I don't fuck around. Don't come at me like that. I play by the rules. My job means too much, whatever. But then there's always that possibility of like, well, what are you talking about? Bring in how many cell phones? How would this work? How would that work? What would I need to do to make 10,000? And that's when you're reeling them in. And for any correctional officers that might be watching this, don't get mad at me. I'm just saying that's how it works. This is coming from somebody that's had a lot of success when it comes to having COs bring in contraband. Anyways, however long it took Lunar and Lil Man to get this free staff person to agree to bring in drugs, cell phones, and whatever else they were having to bring in, at some point, they had a system worked out with them where it was coming in like clockwork. They had him in pocket. He was on the payroll. He was making a lot of money. And, as far as the yard goes, this was their best route. This was their biggest route. They were getting all their dope, all their cell phones. Everything was coming in through this individual. You had other sureños that were hitting in the visiting room, but this wasn't nothing that could sustain the yard. These were guys that were hitting for themselves so that they could get their hustle on, and they were kicking 1/3 of whatever they were getting back to the household. So this really wasn't the Casa's dope. So I don't know if I made this clear, but at this time right here, when all this was happening, Woody from Compton 7-O's was actually the one that was running this yard. However, Chavo from Bakersfield was the one that was invested in this route with these two individuals, Lunar and Lil Man. I'm sure Chavo and Woody set some kind of ground rules as far as how this whole process was going to work, but they had that worked out amongst themselves. And here's the other thing. Even though Lunar and Lil Man were technically the ones that established this route, based on their relationship with this free person, this was a route that Chavo considered to be his. So according to Muggsy, this free staff person was not only bringing in a lot of dope, a lot of cell phones, but he was also consistent. He was doing it every week. This was a symbiotic working relationship, meaning that they were both benefiting from it. The free staff person was obviously getting paid, and then Chavo and all the sureños on the yard were getting their dope. And this enabled them to become self-sufficient, self-sustaining, where they were generating money on the yard. So Chavo, he invested a lot in this route. He didn't want nobody rocking the boat. He didn't want nobody else to know about it. He wanted to know everything about this individual, everything that was going on. And he also wanted to make sure that they maintained a positive relationship with this guy. Always pay him his money, always look out for his best interest. We got to pamper this dude and make him feel comfortable in his role while he's doing this. Because this one individual has the ability to shut this all down. So Lunar and Little Man were obviously in charge of coordinating everything with this individual. They had people on the streets that would meet him. And according to Muggsy, this free staff person agreed to bring these packages in taped up. Exactly how he got them. Taped up. He wasn't going to tamper with them. But on the flip side, he made Little Man and Lunar give him their word that they wouldn't try to bring in any kind of dangerous contraband, any kind of guns or anything like that. Now, I don't know what kind of relationship they had on the streets, but this individual must have trusted them to put that kind of trust in them on a handshake. So it was also their responsibility to make sure they contacted whoever they needed to contact on the streets. And I would assume that this is Chavo's people, to make sure that the next package was accounted for, was wrapped up, and was ready to go, so that this would be done consistently, like clockwork. Every Tuesday, whatever day of the week it was, every week they had a shipment coming in. And during the time throughout the week, while they were waiting for that next package, they would be working to make sure that the next one was wrapped up and ready to go. But even though Lunar and Little Man were doing all the work, this was still Chavo's dope. This was Mexican Mafia dope. Chavo provided Lunar and Little Man with, contact information to his people on the streets that would make sure that they had whatever they needed, whether it was garaga, whether it was meth, yesca, weed, tobacco, whatever it was. Chavo gave them all the resources to make this readily available so that it could be brought in. And that's all they were doing. All they were doing was coordinating it. They didn't have any personal money invested. They didn't have no dope coming in that was theirs. This was all Chavo's. And the other thing about Chavo is he kept this under tight wraps. He didn't want the free staff person to know that he was anywhere involved in this agreement. He didn't even want this guy to know his name. So Chavo was kind of acting like a silent partner. But I'm sure this was more out of being cautious, because these kind of drug smuggling operations, whenever they're detected, when somebody tells on somebody or law enforcement find out, everybody that gets caught up is getting indicted, especially with the way that these main lines are set up now. These guys know that there's Mexican Mafia members out there, Nuestra Familia members, Aryan Brotherhood members out there. These guys are the leaders. They're the leaders. They're the ones that are making everything happen out there. And when there's drugs coming in, they know that these are the guys that are behind it. So it was smart that Chavo wanted to remain in the shadows, and that he didn't want to be nowhere mentioned, in this process, or he didn't want this guy to, have any kind of knowledge that this was actually being done for him, a Mexican Mafia member. The other thing that Muggsy said was that when it came to Chavo and his business acumen, he was very meticulous about how he managed everything. He wanted everything written down. He wanted to know how the money was being managed, who was involved, what was going where. He wasn't micromanaging, but he stayed on top of their system. So I don't know what the reasons are for Chavo having this route established on this yard. So my thinking, or what I'm assuming, is that because this prison is close to Bakersfield, and because Chavo had a lot of resources in Bakersfield and he knew a lot of people in that area, this prison was probably ideal for him to establish a route like this. And that's probably why he did it. So when it came to status between Chavo and Woody, Chavo was obviously the senior member. And as Muggsy said, Chavo really didn't have to give Woody anything. He could have established that route on that yard and he didn't have to kick him back nothing. But out of respect for Woody and him being a brother, he shot him a percentage of everything that was coming in. I'm not sure what it was, but Woody got a percentage, and the Mesa members, every Mesa member on that yard got a percentage of the packages that were coming in. And this isn't a slight towards Woody, but it didn't sound like he was much of a businessman or that he had any kind of hustle game out there on the yard. And then the rest of it was piecemeal from the sureños that were hitting in the visiting room that were breaking off a third of whatever they were getting. And that was the policy on that yard. Anybody that went to the visiting room that hit on their own accord, if they had their own resources and they established a route through somebody that was coming up to visit them, they were required to report that to the mesa, and then they were required to break off a third or whatever they were getting. If they got an ounce, they would have to give up a third of that ounce. If they got a half ounce, they'd have to give a third of that half ounce. Now, here's the other thing. Chavo being from Bakersfield, Lunar and Little Man both being from Eastside Bakersfield, and then all their contacts on the streets being from Bakersfield. Little Man and Lunar held a lot of responsibility in their roles because Little Man and Lunar were the ones communicating with their homeboys on the streets, and because they were the ones who implemented all the policies regarding how the dope was moved, safe housed, and managed. Chavo held them personally accountable for any miscues. If dope got lost, they were held accountable. If a package didn't show up somewhere, they were the ones that were being held accountable. If a package didn't come in, they were held accountable. If they didn't make contact with Chavo's resources on the street, or somebody didn't show up with all the money, Lunar and Little Man were held accountable. It's a cold arrangement, but that's how it works. These guys are the ones that are there on the yard. They're given a lot of latitude. They're given a lot of responsibility as far as setting the policies, implementing the policies. So when something goes wrong, they're the ones that are going to be held accountable because they're the ones that are there. So one day, Little Man, he's on the phone and he's talking to his homies from Eastside Bakersfield. These are the guys that meet up with this free staff person, and these are the guys that make contact with Chavo's resources and pick everything up. So I don't know what the circumstances were, but they go to pick up some dope, and it was supposed to be a good amount of dope, and they end up getting pulled over. They get pulled over, they get shook down, the cops find the dope gone, these guys go to jail. So in a nutshell, that's how it happens. And obviously, when you got homies out there on the streets that are running dope or picking up money, or they're entrusted with some kind of responsibilities out there on the streets, you want to make sure that they're doing everything the way that they're supposed to be doing it. You want to make sure that they're driving a legitimate car, that they're not going to pick up a package of dope in a lowrider with some 13-inch Daytons. You want to make sure that they go pick up the dope in a car that's inconspicuous. It's not going to draw a lot of attention. Just a regular car. The tags are up to date, the lights work, everything's operational. It's a legitimate car. And there's nothing about that car that would, make law enforcement more likely to pull it over. I don't know if these guys were riding around in a car 4 deep with bald heads, murder ones on with the windows rolled down. I don't know what the circumstances were, but they got pulled over and they lost the dope. The exact details of how it was moved or what was involved isn't clear. But what is clear is that the entire neighborhood of Eastside Bakersfield was being held accountable, including Little Man and Lunar. Chavo was pushing a hard line and he held them all accountable. To make matters even worse, preparations were already being made for that dope to hit the yard. I talked about that a little bit in my last story. When you're locked up and everybody's waiting for the next package to come in, a lot of the times what will happen is some of that dope will be sold before it even hits the yard. There's a lot of anticipation that goes into it. Everybody's waiting for it. A lot of guys are trying to get high. There's other dudes that are just trying to get well. You got other guys that are strung out. So there's a lot of anticipation that goes into it. And all that anybody wants to hear at the end of the day is that that package got there. Nobody wants to hear about how somebody got pulled over and they lost the dope, or how this guy didn't come to work and the dope didn't come in today. That's not going to help somebody that's dope sick. And it's not going to help the casa when somebody's already invested $400 or $500 in that dope and that money's already sent out. So a lot of people get pissed off when something doesn't go right. I've been on yards or in holes where there was dope that was coming in consistently. And that's the dangerous thing about that, is when you have a route that's consistent like that and it's coming in like clockwork every week on the money, and you're hitting heroin, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to get strung out. They're going to get that monkey on their back. Or for those that are really going hard, they're going to get a gorilla on their back. And when they're sick, they ain't trying to hear nothing. So these guys lose the dope. Chavo, he blames the whole neighborhood of Eastside Bakersfield. And he basically tells Lunar and Little Man, you guys are responsible for that dope that came up missing. You guys owe a $10,000 fine. And then he gives them a time frame of when they have to pay this $10,000. You guys got 3 weeks to pay it. If you guys don't pay it within 3 weeks, there's serious repercussions. Period. Those are cutthroat politics because a lot of guys just don't have the means to pay a $10,000 fine, especially when you're in prison and you're locked up. Who has those kind of resources? Some people do, but not everybody does. And that's one of the main reasons why a lot of dudes do not want to get involved in politics. This is the kind of cutthroat shit that happens right here. These guys are trying to do everything they can to help the gossip for the household, for the big homie, and then this happens. They end up getting stung for something that they had little or no control over. That's part of the game. Getting pulled over, losing dope, that just comes with the territory. But when you're in a position like that, everything's accounted for and somebody's got to pay it back. So Chavo, he puts his foot down. He's from Bakersfield, but none of that matters to him. He also stipulates that if Lunar and Little Man do not pay this $10,000 fine by this date, that anybody that comes in that's from Eastside Bakersfield is getting whacked. He lets both of these guys know that it's your responsibility to get in touch with, the rest of the homies out there from Eastside Bakers, and you guys better get them to put all their resources together and to come up with that money, or else you guys are going to end up being held accountable, and everybody from Eastside Bakersfield is going to be green-lighted. So from that point on, anyone from Eastside Bakersfield that hit the county jail was getting whacked. And Lunar and Little Man, these guys weren't first-termers. These weren't youngsters that were on their first run. These guys had been around. Matter of fact, Lunar had just got out the chute. He just pulled a shoe program for putting in some work. And apparently, as a badge of honor, he had just gotten a huge campo on the side of his neck. But of course, Chavo, he didn't care about none of that. All he cared about was recovering that money that he lost. And according to Muggsy, the dope that was lost was nowhere near $10,000. Lunar and Muggsy were neighbors at one point. So when all this was going on, he used to talk to Lunar, and Lunar was telling him about the circumstances, what happened, how these guys got busted, and how now him and Little Man were being put on the spot for this 10,000. But Lunar said, man, the dope that was lost out there, it was just a couple of ounces. It was nowhere near $10,000. So, according to Lunar and Little Man, this was just Chavo's way of trying to get some extra money. And this was how he was justifying it. But Little Man, on the other hand, he knew his homies out there on the streets. He knew what they were capable of doing. He obviously knew who was out there. And he didn't feel too confident about them recovering that money. He didn't think that they were going to be able to get that money together and that fine was going to be paid. So he didn't even try to pay that money back. He was like, you know what, man, we're not going to be able to raise this money. We're in a bad situation. It is what it is. But Lunar was trying to rally up his homies out there. He was telling them, you guys need to put everything together, all your resources, put everything together and try to get this money together. Otherwise, you guys are all going to be put on the green light list. We're going to get whacked in here and it's going to be all bad. So whether it was 2 weeks, 3 weeks, Lunar, he's constantly on the phone. He's blowing up phones out there on the streets, trying to get money from everybody he can. He's borrowing money. He's having family drop money off. He's trying to do everything he can do to get this money so that these guys can get out of the situation that they're in. While Little Man was pretty much reserved and accepting of the fact that they were both going to go down over this debt. But in his mind, they weren't just going to crash and burn without fighting either. So he decided to strap up and get himself ready for whoever Chavo was going to send at him and his cellie. So imagine that these two are cellies. One of them is trying to do everything he can within his means. He's even borrowing money from family to try to get this debt paid. He's trying to save their careers. And the other one's already strapping up and getting ready to go out swinging. The cool thing about it is Muggsy said that a lot of Sureños on the yard knew what was going on. And they felt bad for Lunar and Little Man because they were stand-up Sureños. And they were like, man, this is wrong. There's nobody else that you guys can reach out to because what's happening to you guys is foul. But in a situation like that, what can you do? That's Mexican Mafia business. You can't, what are you gonna do? Speak out? Speak out about it? Go and tell, Mexican Mafia member that you feel like that's wrong, that you guys are overstepping your boundaries, that you guys are about to make a bad decision, that this is a bad call. There's not too many individuals that will speak up about something like that unless, somebody's related to somebody or somebody with some kind of influence. But apparently there was nobody like that on this yard. Everybody felt bad and everybody knew what was going on, but nobody could do nothing about it. Just sit back and watch. So according to Muggsy, Lunar, he made one last ditch effort at trying to recover this money. He gets at his homies out there from Eastside Bakersfield, and he's calling everybody he can. He's reaching out to personal resources, trying to get people to pitch in and raise this money. From the way it sounded, the few homies that he had left out there on the streets, they weren't really no hustlers. Nobody was out there balling. These were just some other guys that, were following everybody else's lead. All the guys that they really depended on from Eastside Bakers, those were the ones that got gaffled up when that car got pulled over. They were in jail. So there was nobody that they could really depend on to try to get this money. And the ones that Lunar was reaching out to, apparently they were dragging their feet. They were throwing in 100 here and 100 there, but they got to recover $10,000. And they had a 2 or 3 week period and the money just wasn't coming in. So Muggsy said that, being that Lunar was his neighbor, every time they would come out for unlock or they get ready to come out for chow, they'd be standing in front of their doors, and that's when Muggsy would have a conversation with Lunar. Hey, what's up, man? How's everything looking? Lunar straight up told him, fuck, fool, I don't think we're gonna be able to pay this debt. Looks like it's gonna be all bad. For all you youngsters out there that think this lifestyle is cool, this is another prime example of what can happen when you're batting for your people. You're trying to do everything within your reach and capability, pushing your people forward, trying to make things happen, trying to generate money, and you end up getting crossed up in the process. You end up getting turned on over something that you had little or no control over. They could not do nothing about that. What could they have done different that would have stopped these guys from getting pulled over? I don't know. Maybe there's something that I don't know about. Maybe there's some missing pieces. Maybe these guys were driving around in a lowrider with some 13-inch Daytons, and maybe they had too much tin on the windows and the music was too loud. I don't know. But how can you really hold them accountable when they got their homies out there on the streets that are trying to do the right thing? They're moving this dope for the Mexican Mafia, and they end up getting pulled over. Now they're in jail. They got cases. They're getting ready to go to prison too. That's a sacrifice. It's part of the game. Politics will swallow you up and put you in bad positions like this, and there's nothing you can do about it. I've always heard that Chavo was a fair leader. He was a stand-up type of individual, that he was somebody that really, was about his people. But this is one situation right here where, it makes me wonder if that was true. Supposedly, these weren't just two run-of-the-mill sureños. These were sureños that were hand-selected by Chavo, that obviously had some type of influence, that had put work in the past. And, you cross them up and put them in a position like this where they have really no recourse. And now the treachery of these politics are getting ready to take them out. Muggsy said that Lunar was a solid sureño. He was somebody that obviously he believed in the cause. He put in work, he gets out the shoe, he puts a big campo, an eye buster on his neck, because he not only believed in that, but he was also proud of what he represented. And Muggsy said he's the type of sureño that he was loyal, but he's also the type of dude that you would want to have on your side in a situation like this, that he was a stand-up guy and that he wouldn't let Little Man go down by himself. And that's what he did in this situation with Little Man. Muggsy said that once Lunar had made the decision that, he was all in, and that, he was pretty much resolved with the fact that we're not going to be able to make this money, and that he just ended up telling Little Man, hey, fool, we're just going to have to go out like G's, strap up and get off. So this situation, it ended up turning into a big Kern County car thing. You got Chavo being from Bakersfield, then you got Lunar and Little Man being from Eastside Bakersfield. Then you got, the homies out there on the streets that were also from Eastside Bakersfield. So they took it out to the yard, and that's where they dealt with it. So according to Muggsy, the Mesa advised the Kern County car that they were going to be the ones to deal with Lunar and Little Man. They were going to have to deal with it and that nobody else was going to get involved. So Muggsy said that on the day when the deadline was up, that everybody on the yard knew that something was going to happen. You could feel the tension on the yard. You've been out there on the yard, you know when something's going to happen. You can feel it. There's just something in the air out there that you can feel. You know, and I'm not talking about the outward signs that you can see by reading the yard, the changes in characteristics, subtle changes that you see. People are not working out on the dip bar. There's nobody on the handball court. Everybody's grouped up. It's 100 degrees out and these guys are all wearing jackets and beanies. You know, when you've been on a yard like this for a while and you're used to seeing routines, people are creatures of habit. Wake up, go to the yard, work out, go here, go there, go to sleep, wake up, go here, go to the yard, work out. That's how people program. But when there's a break in that monotony and people are doing something different, that's when you know something's gonna happen. Muggsy said that he even seen the changes in Lunar and Little Man's character. Because they were neighbors, when they would come out for an unlock or when they would come back for chow and they just be kind of hanging around their door, waiting for the tower to pop their doors open, they'd, you know, chop it up or they'd greet each other whenever they'd walk by. They'd say something to each other. But on the day when this debt was due and everybody knew that something was going to happen on that day, Lunar and Little Man were all business. They didn't greet nobody, came out of their cell completely focused on what was about to happen. He said they went out there to the yard knowing that they were going to get moved on. And it was almost like they went out to the yard knowing that they were about to face their consequences. And the Kern County car, they also did this knowing that, you know, Lunar and Little Man weren't no suckers. They knew that more than likely they're going to come out strapped up as well. So, I mean, when you kick it around somebody enough, you know, this dude, he's not going to go out like no sucker. This dude, he's going to strap up and, you know, he's not no punk. He's going to go out there and he's going to get off for his. So the whole Kern County car, they knew that Lunar and Little Man, they were going to strap up and they were going to come out and they were going to get off. So he said when, you know, he went into the Sally Port, that when he walked out of the building, he seen the Kern County car posted up right there at one of the tables. And again, it's crazy when I hear these stories. The one thing that I keep hearing is that these different cars or these different counties are always separated. Kern County, LA County, Orange County, San Diego. You got all these different counties that are separated. They're divided. That's just something I've been tripping on since I've been telling you guys these stories. Where's the unity in that? I'm sure they'll come together, they'll unify when it's time to come together. But why are the Mexican Mafia members allowing these guys to break up into cars? If these were Norteños, the way that the NF used to do it is you guys are going to break that shit up. There ain't going to be no set tripping. There's no cars. There's no Bay Area car, no Salas, no San Jose car, no Sacra car. That shit gets broke up and people get DP'd for that. But the Sureños, they have their way of doing things. The Mexican Mafia has their way of doing things. And I don't know, maybe there's a reason for it. So again, the one thing that Muggsy kept emphasizing is like the whole yard knew what was about to happen. Everybody knew that these guys were about to get down right now, that the Kern County car was about to get off on the yard. So a few minutes after Muggsy comes out the Sally Port and, you know, he sees the Kern County car posted up, he said you could see the 4 shooters to the side. He said that as soon as he seen them, he already knew those are the 4 shooters right there, just by the way they were posted up, and the rest of the Kern County car were just kind of sitting around the table. So Muggsy comes out, he posts up somewhere in that area, and he waits for Lunar and Little Man to come out. So a few minutes later, after he came out, the Sally Port door opens up and the next group comes out. Because that's how they do it when, at least that's how I remember them doing it. When they run the buildings out, they open up one of the Sally Port doors. Everybody kind of walks in. They fill up the Sally Port. They shut that door. Then they open up the yard door and everybody walks out. Then they shut that door. They open up the other door. They let the next group come out. So Little Man and Lunar were in the next group that came out. And as soon as they walked out, they made a beeline straight for the Kern County table. So Muggsy said that he's standing there and he's watching Little Man and Lunar walk over to the Kern County car. And he said it was like they were walking in slow motion. He's watching them. When they get there, they kind of slow down. And later on, I guess he would find out what was said. But supposedly, Little Man and Lunar walk up to the Kern County table and they say, "What's cracking? How you fools want to do this?" It was at that point that Little Man and Lunar both pulled their straps out and threw their hands up like they were ready to fight. So when these two stepped up and posed themselves as threats, that's when an individual by the name of YG, youngster from Bakersfield, told the four shooters to step forward. Then YG supposedly said, "So you guys don't got the money, right?" Little Man and Lunar both said, "No, let's get it." And that's when the four shooters rushed Little Man and Lunar. So now you got six guys, they're all going at it. They all got straps and they're all stabbing each other. You got two on Lunar and two on Little Man. Muggsy said that, as he was standing there watching this go down, these guys getting off on each other, all of them were stabbing each other. He said that even though he knew from that point on that both Little Man and Lunar were going to be deemed no good and they were going to be considered as trash, he said that he still had a profound level of respect, for both of them for being stand-up guys, for going out there and standing up for theirs. He said there's just something honorable about it because a lot of guys would have locked it up or they would have got off the yard before it even got to that point, or they would have just allowed themselves to be victimized. But here were two solid sureños that strapped up and got put in a situation that they couldn't get out of and said, "Well, fuck it. If that's what's going to happen, then let's get it." So in the end, Muggsy said that Lunar and Little Man, they did the best they could. They went out swinging. They got down for theirs, but they had two shooters on each one of them. And eventually, they got the best of them. But the other thing he said is that this whole incident, it took place by the watch office. And the watch office is like the administration offices where a lot of the COs, the brass are at, the lieutenants, the sergeants, that's where all their offices are at. But you have a lot of the times the yard officers, that's where they're going to respond from, and they'll flood that whole area quick. So at some point, one of the gun towers hits the alarm and tells these guys to get out. But, they're going at it. You got three over here that are getting off, and you got three over here that are getting off. He tells them to get down. They don't get down, so he fires off Big Bertha a couple of times, the 37 millimeter block gun, and this has no effect. They keep going at each other. But again, the watch office is right there. You got the yard officers that came running out and they run up on them and they start saturating them with that OC chemical spray. They start spraying them down. And, unless you're like me, or I used to tell these guys when they used to spray me with that shit, put some of that shit on my sandwich. That's all you got? No, on the real though, that OC chemical spray is vicious. It depletes the oxygen. Some people get sprayed with it and they can't breathe. Other people can get sprayed with it and it might have little or no effect. It might burn your eyes and burn your skin, but it's not going to stop you from fighting or jumping on somebody if that's what you're doing, especially when your adrenaline is all over the place. So these guys get saturated with OC chemical spray and they prone out. They hit the ground and it's over. They all get cuffed up and they take all six of them to the infirmary, which is the prison's medical area. Apparently, all six of them got lucky. Nobody was hurt critically. They all got some kind of stab wounds or scratches, but they get medically cleared and then they take them all to the hole. And then they took them to the hole, which pretty much concluded this incident. So Muggsy said that eventually their homies from Eastside Bakersfield, I'm not sure if it was the ones that were already out there, if these guys that were in the county jail got out, they bailed out, or if it was somebody else from Eastside Bakersfield that stepped up. But eventually, within 2 or 3 weeks, Eastside Bakersfield, the Sureños from Eastside Bakersfield paid that $10,000 fine. They ended up making good on it. Chavo got his 10 bands and the green light was rescinded. But the cool thing about it was that, everybody from Eastside Bakersfield, until that green light was taken off, whenever anybody from Eastside Bakersfield hit the county jail, Kern County, they were getting blasted. No questions asked. And this was something that Chavo was strictly enforcing. All the different cars that were out there on the yard were all advised that anyone who landed on that yard from Eastside Bakersfield was getting hit until that fine was paid in full, period. In closing, Muggsy said that, at the end of the day, we're all gangsters, and that in situations like this, your true character is tested. You either fold and lock it up, you allow yourself to be victimized, or you strap up and stand up for yourself. I understand Muggsy's point, but at the same time, this is another example of the hypocrisy that exists within this lifestyle. Drugs and money became the priority, and two more careers were ended because of it. Because somebody's package didn't make it in, because somebody else was dope sick. They pressed Little Man and Lunar to pay that money because they were the closest, and they were the ones who they could hold accountable. But this was another bad call. You guys tell me what you think in the comments. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this story. I want to extend my appreciation to everybody that's been sharing stories with me. You guys know who you are. I got story after story after story lined up that are ready to be told to you guys. So I'm going to keep dropping these stories. You guys keep tapping in and let's continue to grow. With that being said, this your boy B, and I'm out.